the stimulus package as offered by the government of Ghana to support small and medium-scale enterprises and businesses here in Ghana to be able to sustain themselves during this pandemic. And we want to assess the impact so far and how the political parties are playing into it towards the 2020 elections. The guest we have tonight is somebody that we will try as much as possible, if he has time, to bring him back into the studio towards the election to analyze the people's campaign or the political parties' campaign and their manifestos, especially for the youth, on employment or unemployment, on education, on how it is going to develop the youth of Ghana. Our guest tonight is Dr. Richmond Kwame Frimpong. Dr. Richmond Kwame Frimpong is the Executive Director and Lead Consultant of Financial Literacy Foundation Africa. Now, Financial Literacy Foundation Africa has a mandate of ending, or his sector has a mandate of ending extreme poverty in 8 out of 10 Africans by 2020. I hope I'm right.
You're right.
8 out of 10 Africans by 2020.
Right.
How are you doing that? 2030?
Yes.
Yes, 2030. And is that happening already?
Well,
are you achieving it?
We launched the campaign about 6 months ago. And currently we have representation in 46 countries. And we've been able to reach quite a number of people with a number of programs. One of those programs is, during this pandemic, we've launched a financial literacy for coronavirus alleviation. Okay. And we've partnered with a number of developmental agencies to make this happen. So I believe by 2030 we should get this done. This is SDG 1 and we are committed to it.
So what exactly do you do? Financial Literacy Foundation, you support people to understand the financial system, you're promoting financial inclusion. What exactly? So
if you look at the financial inclusion cycle, it has two of that cycle, looking at financial literacy and then financial education and access. We are focused on that, and we are looking at targeting the formal and the informal sector. Now we pick the data out of the SDGs for SDG 1, and across sub-Saharan Africa, we've identified specific groupings and we've marked them. And we are using programs virtually and physically, radio, TV, groupings and things like that, to reach out to educate as many people as possible on all the financial services universe pillars: banking, pensions, insurance, investments, just to get so many people to be financially literate. And when they are, it becomes easier to put them into the financial inclusion gap, and then they can get themselves out of
In Ghana here, are we making any headway? We have mobile money working so well now. We have the Ghana Interbank Payment System also working. We have the banks having their own online platforms and all of that, so that people, it captures a lot more people, the farmers in the rural communities, the people that would not ordinarily walk into the bank to put their monies in, those who have been doing susu and savings under their beds and all of that. Are we making any headway?
Some effort has been made. In fact,
forgive me for diverting a bit, but fine. I mean, this will end this part and then we can come.
Some effort has been made. In fact, if you look at the World Bank's report on financial inclusion and financial literacy, across the entire sub-Saharan Africa, we don't have more than 10 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, all the way from Mauritania down to Lesotho, South Africa. We don't have more than 10 countries that have passed the financial literacy index. Okay. And Ghana is not in a very good shape. But I must say that the structures and the effort that is being put in is quite interesting and quite good. And I'm hoping that past COVID, we'll be able to even aggressively engage governments, engage the public sector, the private sector, to drive this home, because all the other countries have taken this a bit more seriously and they are driving it across all the 46 countries. So
I'm sure you will give us some time to come back to you, maybe after the elections. Now our focus is very much on the elections. I mean, whether we are discussing businesses or the economy or whatever it is, it's focusing on the election. So maybe after the elections, you would allow us come back to you to talk about financial literacy, financial inclusion, and everything that has to do with it. But let me now come to our topic that we have set for today, the stimulus package of Ghana to support the country's businesses or the financial management of the country during this period. Let me ask you this general question to start with. Have we as a country been able to financially manage ourselves, or has government been able to financially manage the country within this period to your satisfaction as an expert?
Thank you. I mean, to my expectation, no, I wouldn't say.
Government hasn't been able to?
I want to say that it shouldn't be to my expectation. It should be to the expectation of Ghanaians. But on the side of...
You're a Ghanaian, you are an expert, you're a financial literacy consultant, and so your view will tell us whether we are moving forward or we are moving backwards.
So I would use the indices, and that is where our work goes into.
Sure.
From the work we have done, we think that if you want to tell whether we have been able to close the gap that the coronavirus pandemic has brought in our GDP deficit, then you can see that the recovery rate is showing that some good work has been done. However, the greatest component of that GDP contribution, which is about 70% coming from the MSMEs, which is well in excess of about 4 million people, is still struggling to pick their feet. And that is where the conversations about the stimulus comes in. Look, if you look at the stimulus package that was given to the NBSSI to manage, for example,
600 million.
600 million, we said about 800,000 plus people applied. Rake it down to about 700,000 plus. As I speak now, the statistics show that they've been able to give about 200,000. That is just about 25% of the numbers that applied. So 800,000 out of over 4 million, and then out of the 800,000, 200,000 being given access. It's a great effort, it's a great initiative, but if we just want to use that to tell how well we are going to close that 70% gap in the GDP, it is not enough. And so that is how you measure whether or not we are able to do well or we are not able to do well. Because if we say, according to ESA's report, say that 70% of our GDP comes from the MSMEs, formal or informal, and we do an indication of a project, and 800,000 come to apply, and we are able to offer, of course, we can't give everybody, but we are able to offer 200,000, which is 25%. Let's say the ones that are given to the banks and maybe through the MasterCard initiative would also do another 25. That is about 50% of those that applied. So you can see that 800,000 out of 4 million is really not
good enough.
Yes, and that should tell you that we have a long way to go. That tells you that there is a reason why we say the GDP reconstruction will take time. So because from 6.8 growth rate to just about 1.5, we are projecting still 0.9, even negative. It should tell you that it is taking us about 4 or 5 years to come back to the growth patterns we were. Why? Because the gaps we need to fix to push and stimulate the economy. That's why it's a stimulus package. We haven't been able to reach the bigger majority, and that is what accounts for these challenges. Secondly, let me say, it is even not good enough to just say we have given these numbers. If you go to the statistics I have seen from the NBSSI, even in the 200,000 plus, you will see that there is a distribution of, say, Accra, 40,000 being the second highest, Ashanti region being about 52,000, which is the highest, and it runs through across all the other regions in the 16. Now, when you look at that statistics, there is always a report or there is always feedback on what they are doing and the people they are giving.
Yes.
But if we are deliberate to close the deficit in our GDP reconstruction, then we should say that the numbers that applied in the entire MSME sector, which ones are the most productive sectors, and what is the gap that has been created because of the COVID. Now, as we put this money into that gap, what are we expecting to get, and how long is it taking to get us there in terms of employment, in terms of production, in terms of expenditure, in terms of all the things that make up our GDP? That data doesn't show. But to look at just the face of we have given out this number and not to situate it into the real gap that contributes to GDP, I think we will still need to back up if we really want to close it.
Is this based on the structure of our economy?
It is. It is, largely because the structure of our economy, which depends on the informal sector, has not been able to get to a point where at the press of a dot we can pick up a good data on this.
So how are we then, or NBSSI or government, then able to strategize in such a way that a lot of these people are in the informal sector? How do you get them out, fish them out, and say that these are the productive people or sectors within the bracket for which we are going to support. And so let's pick them out and be able to support them.
Two things we need to do. First, the will that we put behind political machinery. If you look at our political system, it's one of the best on the continent, our democracy. It is the best because it has been structured such that it goes down to the minutest detail. So when a political party that is well-oiled wants to win an election, it can trace it down to the last hat in the worst village.
Yes.
If we pick that same system and energy and understanding, and we throw that system behind our informal sector setup, we'll be able to regulate it.
Without proper research, without proper data?
The politicians and the political parties have data for every constituency, for every district. That's
within their political setup. For example, if you pick the NPP, they have from the top, the headquarters people, they come to the regionals, they come to constituency, they come to polling stations. So within every, maybe some meters of the country, you will find somebody who is representing. If you come to the NDC as well, you would have up to the chapters. Every community you have representation. So if I am understanding you well, that's the structure you want us to pick as a country. That government should pick. Don't we have that already? From the president through the local government to the district chief executives and the municipal chief executives to the assembly members.
That is why I'm saying the same political will behind political machinery. Because the structures are there, the demarcations are there. We just need to commit that same effort, that drives activity to that last minutest detail through this governance structure, and it will work. Now, we must do that through a certain institution, the local government system, the Ministry of Trade, the Ministry of Foreign Finance. Now look at this NBSSI project, great, and now it's been raised into an agency. So it will be I think the Ghana Enterprises Agency.
Yes.
It has about 118 branches or so across all the 16 regions. That same effort through this structure would be able to identify every single informal sector activity. And when we do, thank God, we have entered into a system where we are digitizing almost everything we do. National Health Insurance recently, I'm told you're able to now merge National Health Insurance and the Ghana card. Everybody probably at a point will get a Ghana card. 15 million people now have it. And so if we can integrate all these things, mobile money, penetration, way in advance of what we are expecting. And almost everybody who has a phone has a mobile money system. This is how we do a telepathy communication among the governance structure, among the NBSSI setup, and then the machinery and the drive behind the politics to get this done if you are interested. Until we do this, there would always be a gap between our GDP construct and where we want to get to. And when we don't fill it,
the impact is zero.
It's zero when we don't fill, because we can put about 100 million into a project.
So 600 million Ghana cedis plus a MasterCard and all of that.
Yes.
We are still not, the impact for you, or the impact according to your statistics is still zero.
It is.
Because
no, I would say zero, but
very minimal.
It is minimal, and it's
because
not
of the lack of coordination, because of the lack of political will, the energy that the politicians use, which is not behind these institutions that are working on the field.
Because of that and more, and I'm saying that let's pick this practical example of NBSSI money.
Yes.
We are putting about 750 million to stimulate the economy through the MSME sector. Okay, there is a reason why we are doing that.
Yes.
So that growth can be hastened.
Yes.
So when we are putting that money into that sector,
yes,
we should be able to tell the pointers in that sector that is going to bring us the growth rate we are looking for. So when we say 800 people have put in application out of a certain number, and we pick 200 and we are giving them funding, which is 25%. Shouldn't we be able to tell that this 25% represent this shortage in the GDP gap from that sector? And so as we have injected this amount, this is what we are looking to receive in the next 3 years. We can't make that projection. We can only say we have given 200,000 people. We can only make videos and indicate that, okay, this person has treated with
how much productivity has gone on, how much returns we have gotten. We can't measure.
And until we are able to do that, it will be our growth gap closure will be dependent on happenstance.
Financial Literacy Foundation, or Doc, you yourself, I mean, you have come from a background of finance.
Right.
Have you engaged the NBSSI?
We've not just the NBSSI, we've engaged government on a number of occasions, and we've actually written.
And told them about what the research data and pointers should be like.
We have. We've told
how they should be able to measure the returns.
In fact, we've engaged the NBSSI. And one of the pleas we made to government is that they should support the NBSSI in such a way that even if they have to draw a power system against the local government system, they'll be able to do it alone. Thankfully, I have seen that their capacity is being strengthened from an agency from just a board to an agency.
Authority, yes.
And that is a good improvement. But I'm saying that in such a time like this, when we have COVID, and there is a big window for transformation, if we miss out on this COVID period, when a lot of things can change. Look, you put in a request, you put in a stimulus package and say, anybody who wants it should apply. And 800,000 people plus.
But Doc, that 800,000 people is made up of, first of all, fraudulent people. Secondly, people who think it's quote and unquote, it's some political money to share. So let's all apply and take it. So at a go, you can take out some 200,000. Is that not the case?
I don't think so. Because in the 800,000, they did the sieving, they did the corrections, and it came to about 700,000. Even if, let's even assume that even if there are a number of people there that were not right, remember the real numbers are more than 800,000.
Yes.
And so even when you get 800,000, say 91 days or in 3 weeks applying, it's a good opportunity for you to now set the tone for formalizing the sector. And this is the time. If we miss this window, the opportunity to include this informal sector would be missed.
Is it too late?
Not too late at all. No, not at all. Not at all. I mean,
we have almost spent 600 million already.
It's more than that, actually. If you add the MasterCard, if you add the additional 150 million, it's more than that. And
almost a billion.
It's not much. It's not going to change much. It's good. It's a great effort, but it's not going to change much. And I'm saying that there is still time. If you are interested in correcting it, there is still time to do that.
Before I come to whether it should be free or not, there was support with the ECG, electricity, support through ECG, support through water as well. You don't think that came also as a good note to support businesses, especially those who are paying the commercial rates and all that? I
think in total, the government's economic recovery plan has been great, and that includes the water.
From what I'm hearing now, if I can project, even though it's been great, it hasn't gone according to plan, and it hasn't been based or premised on research and data.
I can't say that, but what I'm saying is that there should be a connection between the GDP gap that the COVID has created and the stimulus packages we are putting in. A stimulus package is like a catalyst that corrects the gap that the GDP has received in shock because of the COVID. So anything we are putting in, we should be able to trace that thing to the recovery in terms of the closure of the gap. And I'm saying until we do that deliberately, we will just be putting in that package. That's the point I'm making.
Let me now come to what the format should have been. People think that it should have been free for everybody that's applying because of the times in which we are.
What is the question?
Should it have been free for the people?
Again, we should be very careful. Remember, we have already put in a lot of things that are free to stimulate. The good thing about the stimulus packages that have gone on is that it's not a biting stimulus package in terms of the cost of credit that has been given. The cost of credit is way below the average on the markets. And so then it is something that really can help the ordinary person to boost his economy or his infrastructure or his business and pay back. Remember, there is even a moratorium over that. So it doesn't require you pay now. This is somewhat free, but to create the impression that payback should not be accounted for. Remember, we are battling now between the two political parties and government, a case of debt to GDP.
Exactly.
And this stimulus package is a composition of the debts we are battling with. Now, if we put in this amount, which makes a portion of the debt, and we don't make any effort to let it show on the GDP side, are we going to come back to ask ourselves if our debt to GDP ratio is getting worse? If we are going to, then we shouldn't be talking about free now, particularly when we don't have numbers to show that we put in $1 billion, we put in $2 billion, it is bringing this in terms of GDP so that the denominator would increase and then the debt to GDP ratio will go down. If we can't give that data, we should be careful, because ordinarily our ability to pay back as a people is a difficult thing. That's why non-performing loans are doing very bad.
Everywhere in the economy.
Even in the private sector is a difficult thing. How much more in a facility given by government? And so rather we should engage people to use the window of the moratorium to do well, the window of the very minimal price of the or the cost of the credit to do well, and encourage them to produce and do well with their business so they can pay back either in revenue terms, they can pay back for other people. Remember I said we have about 4 million people, 800,000 people applied. We've given only 200,000. Don't you think if they're able to do well and they pay back after the moratorium, we can give this to more people who can do well so our GDP base can go up and then debt to GDP will reduce? That should be the conversation. We shouldn't just be saying free.
I asked that because you have seen some political parties saying that it should have been given out free because people are distressed, businesses are distressed. And so if they were in power, one of the other, I didn't want to sound political, but it's become a matter of discussion that it should have been free or given out just like that. And you don't subscribe to that.
It must always be based on data. We shouldn't say I do or I do not. If you look at the NDC's manifesto, for example, you notice that they are deliberate about how they want to help the MSMEs. They talk about tax reliefs. They even talk about a certain number of employees you may have, up to 20, and you have corporate tax reduced and things like that. It's a deliberate effort. It's a form of stimuli. It's a form of stimulus package. But it is not just free, because when you are able to help them at a certain point, they will bring back revenue that will support your GDP base. We should not just say this is free until we are able to trace the investment of this stimulus package back to GDP, so that the debt burden that this stimulus package brings would go down and our debt to GDP doesn't become a mess.
Doc, my final question, we did not see much, or we haven't seen much of private sector support to these SMEs or MSMEs that we are talking about. For example, the banking industry. We still see very high interest rates. We still see prime rates. We still see all of the things that will hold you at your neck when you want to, for example, access the processes haven't changed even within this period. That we should see the private sector or the banks, for example, supporting small businesses, supporting, for example, the areas within which they are located, businesses within the enclave to grow.
It's yes and no. Yes, because in the entire program of the government's recovery plan, you will notice that they made some allocations and some plans for the banks to be able to give the same packages at discounted rates. I mean, if you even look at the policy rate, it's gone down favorably, and so the burden of credit is quite cheaper, not competitive, but quite cheaper. Number two, they have given them options that make now possible for even some of them to access a particular kind of credit up to about 400 million or so. And so I think there is some effort. The only challenge is that the same risk factors that the banks notice that bring non-performing loans are still evident and rare. And so they are not just interested in just giving out until those factors are crossed out. And that is why I'm saying that we probably have to hasten our steps in formalizing the informal sector. If that doesn't happen, we can proclaim and declare a policy, but the private sector will never implement.
Thank you very much, Doc. Dr. Richmond Kwame Frimpong is the Executive Director and the lead consultant for Financial Literacy Foundation Africa.